Hello, and welcome to the Parenting Neurodivergent Teens and Young Adults podcast. I'm Dr. Ed Callahan, a Ph.D. level therapist, coach, and educator. If you're a parent of a neurodivergent teen and you're struggling, or if you just want to be the best parent you can possibly be for your teen, then this podcast is for you. My deepest intention is to take my 30 plus years of experience and provide the most efficient ways to share vital information to help life go better for everyone involved, for your neurodivergent teen, their siblings, and especially for you as a parent. I am continually creating a range of support materials and coaching packages from no-cost social media content to intensive premium services so you can find access to the level of support that is right for you and your family circumstances. As a great place to start, please consider joining my low-cost parent support community, where I provide informative courses, practical content, Q&A sessions, and most importantly, where other like-minded parents will be available to give and receive support. And if you believe you need more intensive and individualized support, contact me to determine what level of support would be appropriate for your needs. See the links in the show notes or visit my website at neurodiversity-u.com. I hope you find value and enjoy this episode. Please note, with all my programs and content, this is for parent training and educational purposes only and does not represent therapy nor qualify as establishing a therapist-client relationship. Please like and subscribe and leave any questions and comments or suggestions for future content in the comment section below. All right, with all that out of the way, let's get started. All right, everybody. Well, welcome to episode 2 of Parenting Through Neurodiversity. I'm Dr. Ed Callahan, and this is Amy J, who again is joining me to discuss all kinds of things relative to parenting a neurodivergent teen or young adult.
Hi there.
Welcome again. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it always. So, I don't know, I guess part of what I think we need to do is talk about, like, why are we doing this, right? Like, what's the point? Why are we doing these podcasts and trying to get, some information out there? For one, my heart of hearts is I really want to help families who have neurodivergent teens or young adults. And because I know it can be very challenging. And again, like we said last time, it's a lot of times the parenting advice is just the opposite of what traditional parenting would recommend, or maybe what you're getting advice from in the typical parenting books, or even, therapists or other professionals out there would be giving more traditional parenting advice, which is a lot of times not helpful and may actually be somewhat harmful to a neurodivergent teen or young adult. So,
and I would say it's almost always not going to work. At least that's been my experience.
I'm trying to be a little bit politically correct. I say it's all bad advice out there. Don't do it, But yeah, I mean, I agree. And again, that's something that I learned over years and years and years of practicing and just seeing, how a lot of the common and typical things were just not working. In fact, we're just making things worse. And it's tough because my wife, who's a school principal, was just telling me about a story of a kid who she absolutely knows is getting misdiagnosed by a local psychiatrist. They went and see it. And again, the typical diagnosis from the testing was a very strong attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. But then they go and ignore all of the autism spectrum symptoms and go with the diagnosis of oppositional defiant disorder, which I'm just like, no, that's the worst. You know what I mean? Because then the kid gets treated like he or she is oppositional or defiant, when really it's about emotional overwhelm. It's about being flooded. It's about, not being able to manage the stresses that they're under in the moment. And so the problem with the oppositional defiant diagnosis is it's like a challenge to a parent a lot of times. It's like, okay, you just got to out boundary this kid. Like, you just got to hold stronger boundaries. You got to be firm on the consequences. You got to take away privileges, ground them, whatever, take their devices away. And for a neurodivergent kid, that's the absolute wrong thing to do, because a lot of times, they're not reacting. They're not being oppositional for the same reasons. You know what I mean? They're being oppositional from overwhelm position, or not being able to transition well, or not being able to regulate their emotions well enough. And so treating them as if they're oppositionally defiant is exactly the opposite of what they need. So,
and we had a very similar experience where one of our children was diagnosed very young with ADHD, but the autism diagnosis didn't come until later. And we had a lot of difficulty because we did think there was some more boundary stuff we could do, and it always backfired. And we didn't quite understand why until the autism diagnosis came along. And then it was much easier, but we realized so much of what we'd been doing was just absolutely the wrong. It was like throwing gasoline on a fire. And it was painful. It was painful for the whole household, and especially for my child, which is the most upsetting.
Yeah, for sure. And again, being the best parent you can, you're trying to do what's recommended, what all the books say to do, and all the traditional advice, and what you experienced as a child, and what you've been telling you, what your friends and family are telling you to do, and it's all the wrong advice for that particular situation. So yeah, and I guess I would say to anyone listening to this, if your teen or young adult has a diagnosis of ADHD, then it's statistically likely that they are on the autism spectrum as well, or vice versa, particularly the other way around. If they have an autism diagnosis, then it's almost guaranteed that they have some level of attention deficit disorder. It's not always the case, but those two things go together very, very commonly. So even if they're not really showing really strong autism characteristics or whatever, but they do have ADHD, then it's likely it's there at some degree or another. So and vice versa. If they have autism, then it's almost it's much more likely that they're going to have ADHD. So, but again, so what I see happen a lot in schools with school psychologists and and psychiatrists or whatever out there, that they will see the ADHD, and that's a little bit more commonly diagnosed, and there's probably even some better assessments for it and things like that. So it's one that is commonly diagnosed, but then they go to oppositional defiant disorder instead of trying to understand the autism spectrum for whatever reason. That one gets overlooked. So
and again, the problem is, as a parent, you don't know what you don't know. So
and again,
it's
you
really
go to a school psychologist or a psychologist in general who's doing the testing, or you get a diagnosis from a therapist or a psychiatrist, then what else are you supposed to do? You went to the expert, and they gave you the information and gave you the assessment, and unfortunately, a lot of them missed the boat on the ADHD autism combination. So again, particularly if you have an ADHD diagnosis with an oppositional defiant diagnosis, I'd say that's a red flag right there. Make sure, double check, do whatever you got to do, get a second opinion, third opinion, whatever. Do some research and find out for yourself, and make sure, because there are reasons to have an oppositional defiant diagnosis, and that is a real thing. But if ADHD is present, then it makes me more suspicious that it's more autism than oppositional defiant. So, anyways, just food for thought, and pay attention and double check on that kind of stuff.
Any diagnosis you get, make sure it makes sense to you.
Yeah, and it feels right to your gut as a parent as well. And again, it's hard to really, the responsibility does unfortunately lie on you as a parent, because the experts will have their biases and their opinions and things like that, and then and you just got to, I guess, kind of do a little bit of research on your own. Well, I definitely recommend that, but also just make sure it fits with your experience with your child. And again, it's hard. That's a hard one I want to put a big asterisk by it, because an autism meltdown, or that pervasive or pathological demand avoidance, or pervasive drive for autonomy, looks like opposition. That PDA, the pathological demand avoidance, I'll just call it demand avoidance. That looks like oppositionality, but it's just coming from a different place. So that's why it's super important to understand, because if you know that your child is on the autism spectrum, you realize that they are struggling with transitions, the emotional overwhelm, the way they process information takes them longer and they need more time. Whereas an oppositional kid is doing it for a whole different set of reasons. And, I could go in on that forever as well. But the true oppositional defiant teen or young adult does need the hard boundaries. I mean, that's the right way to approach that. But a teen or young adult on the autism spectrum, it's not the same. It's not for the same reasons or motivations, and so it's important to treat it very differently.
I want to come back to the PDA just because it's all about me, and I don't have a lot of experience with that, so I want to understand it better. But before we do that, I mean, I know some about your background. Obviously, I know you have a doctorate and all that kind of stuff. But I wonder if you could, kind of tell me about your work experience and kind of how you got where you are.
Yeah, I out of graduate school started private practice and was working with families, and then after probably 8 or 9 years or so, I had some good friends and colleagues that were working in a wilderness program that they had set up, and so they wanted me to come join them. So eventually, I said, "Sure, why not?" And went out there and was being a therapist in a wilderness treatment program. And that was a great experience for me. I mean, I loved to camp and hike and all that kind of stuff, and then to do therapy and camp and get paid and all that kind of stuff. It was like a great combination of everything that I like to do. And so that was a big learning experience. And again, kids on the spectrum were coming through. It wasn't quite as known way back in the day when I was doing that. And so, there'd be things like quirky kids or awkward kids or something like that, you know what I mean? Or kids with social struggles or social difficulties. And so it was, again, that's when I started really seeing that, okay, these kids are different and they're not reacting or acting from the same headspace as some of the kids that were oppositional or that were having substance issues and things like that. So I started to realize that, we need to find a whole different approach to working with these kind of teens that we were working with. And then help educating the families on, okay, this looks this way, but this is more what's going on. And then once the parents started to understand what was happening neurologically, or that this was a neurological processing difference, that helped them shift their mindset about how to interact with their kid, and
Right.
they would understand them differently. Because again, if you think your kid's being oppositional, then you want to kind of push back. But if you realize, they're struggling for a different reason, then you feel less.
It's far less triggering for a parent.
You don't want to get in a power struggle with a kid when you realize it's not necessarily their willful decision to be having a hard time in that moment. So after Wilderness, I was able to be the executive director of a boarding school that, again, was working with teens and their families. And then I, all along, was hoping to be able to start a therapeutic boarding school that was specific to helping kids with ADHD and autism at the time. So I believe we were probably the first therapeutic boarding school that was geared towards working with kids on the autism spectrum and for ADHD specifically. So
was this back in the 90s or early 2000s?
Mid 2000s.
Mid 2000s, okay.
Yeah, and so got that up and going, and was one of the founding partners there. And our full intent was to create an environment that was going to provide a healthy environment for kids that were neurodivergent. I mean, that wasn't really a term back in the day, but a place that would be a safe place for these kids to be, and that we would understand them and provide all the educational supports that they needed and the therapeutic supports that they needed, and help them learn all the social, social interactions, and help them learn and grow through that. And as a parent, you can understand how challenging it can be at times to have one kid on the spectrum in your household, but try a school full of them, it gets a little bit tricky. So,
yes, I can imagine.
It was a big learning curve, and we had our hands full. And I think it was a really good experience. At some point, I broke away from that several years down the road, and definitely look back on it as a really good experience. So, really had the opportunity to start that from scratch and get it up and running. And then, we were bought out by another program, so I exited at that point. So it wasn't my baby anymore. So
yes,
but again, trying to really put my mind and heart and soul into, like, how do we create an environment that's healthy for kids that are on the autism spectrum and that are struggling with ADHD and other learning disabilities. Like I said, the pathological demand avoidance, which isn't technically a diagnosis, but it's more like a subset of autism spectrum disorder.
Well, and the reason I asked when the timing was is because there was a while there where I felt like there were a lot more resources and programs available for neurodivergent kids. And it seems like now, after the pandemic, things have really trimmed down. And that's why I think your program is so important, because it gives folks who, may have gone to a wilderness. I mean, maybe not quite that extreme, or to a boarding school, but, something that they can tap into and use on a regular basis to kind of get that all around family support, where you learn about, not just, what's going on with your child, but how you can create an environment that helps support them, so that, as you said, when they push back, the immediate response is, oh, I'm going to push back too. Because, you're having a bad day or a good day, you've got your own emotions that you're trying to, but the minute you start to understand, they're not doing this to be difficult. They're doing this because there's something wrong for them.
Right. They need support. They
right.
would do,
they're overstimulated.
If they could handle it. Yeah. If they could
right.
handle it, they would be handling it. I think
right.
again, most kids, if they can handle things, they will. If they're struggling, it's because they're overwhelmed, or they've got, they need additional support somehow. So,
well, and what I realized as a parent is, when my kids get extremely dysregulated, that means they're having a heck of a lot of worse day than I am. And really what they need is to understand that, they've got a soft place to land. And usually once they understand that, it does help de-escalate it. I mean, you go through a few bad moments, but ultimately, hopefully they calm down. So
yeah, and that's that's something that we'll have to come back and talk to probably multiple times, is that emotional regulation and managing your own emotions as a way to model that, and also, like you said, to create that safe landing for them. Because if you're losing it, they're already having a hard time regulating themselves as it is. But then if you are dysregulated yourself, or getting mad or upset or frustrated, then that's just going to add fuel to the fire to them.
Yeah,
as well,
there's
right?
that
So
gasoline.
then everybody's going to spin out. Yeah, and so then it becomes just gets, everyone's kind of feeding each other and into.
And just so nobody out there feels bad about themselves, I've done that a billion times. Even when I knew better, sometimes it just gets away from you. I mean,
absolutely,
this is tough.
Right, and again, it does take a lot of practice and effort and thought, and kind of I guess use the term mindfulness. Like being mindful of what you're going to do, or hey, this is starting to get difficult, or my son or daughter is starting to have a meltdown right now, and I take that space. Okay, I need to really be careful right now, because this is easy for me to get pulled into. So
well, and I've there've been multiple times where I say to my husband, "I'm tagging out. You got to tag in. I don't have the emotional control right now to deal with this." Not everybody has that luxury, but if you do, that's certainly a way to go.
Yeah, and again, we talk about a lot of different strategies and things like that through the programs and everything that we're trying to get together here. So, so I guess there was a lot of questions in there. Let's see if I can go back and answer some of those. One is that since the pandemic, I think a lot of like say those wilderness resources and therapeutic boarding school programs and things like that, there's been a tremendous shift away from that. And, it's probably thanks to a lot of Netflix documentaries as well, in terms of programs that were really doing bad stuff. There were definitely some programs out there that were horrendous. But, if you notice that a lot of those documentaries were from programs that were way back in the
decades
late
ago.
90s. Yeah. And so then it's tough, because that's impacting the current programs that, I know a lot of really good, solid programs with good people running them that are closing for financial reasons. You know what I mean? It's just like, and I don't blame parents for that. You know what I mean? But sometimes those programs are very necessary and very important. And, but yeah, and again, the programs that aren't doing well or aren't supervising the kids well, or being abusive, certainly should not be in existence, for sure. I want to be clear about that. And having been in that, in those situations and in those programs, and running them, I understand the challenges and how difficult it can be to operate a program like that and to do it well. So I get that it can be tough. So even the good programs that are trying hard may make mistakes, but the ones that were bad actors, that's just unacceptable, and definitely should be on a Netflix documentary for sure. So
yes.
But so all that being said, there's been a pretty dramatic shift in terms of I guess, where parents can go for support and what they feel comfortable doing.
I would say it's a void, my opinion, but it's almost a void.
Again, I think the pendulum will probably swing. There'll probably be some middle ground where the really good programs to still be alive and well, but it's definitely there's less options than there used to be for sure. So after doing Wilderness and running, being the executive director of 2 boarding schools and 1 Wilderness program, then I started doing in-home interventions, and so I would travel across the country, meet with families for a weekend, and go over some curriculum and set up some parenting plans and things like that, and then follow up with about 4 months of virtual coaching, kind of like what we're doing right now. So it'd be an in-home visit with 4 months of weekly coaching that we would do from there. So, and again, these were high-end, very expensive programs. You know what I mean? And I understand, like, the Wilderness programs are super expensive. The therapeutic boarding schools are very expensive.
Yeah, it's not an option for everybody.
Right, and there's reasons for that. Those are very expensive programs to run and operate. But there was also, obviously there were businesses and they were making money too, so there's that part of it. But so even the in-home interventions that I was doing were very expensive. That was about $18,000 plus expenses for the families to have me come out for the weekend and follow up with the coaching. And but the main point of that was to help kids transition home from the Wilderness programs and the therapeutic boarding school. So and that was an interesting niche to be in, because I really felt that was an important place to be, because the parents would put a major investment in Wilderness and then a major investment in both time and money in these treatment programs, and then their son or daughter would come home, and that's a difficult transition, coming back home for the teen or the young adult, but also for the family. And so to support them through that process was very, very important.
It would be very easy to fall back into the old patterns, I'm sure.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Without some guidance.
Yeah, and the parent, all those dynamics that really, because of the separation, they didn't get a chance to fully work through, were kind of dormant and alive and well when they all got back together
sadly,
again.
yes.
And so so there was a lot of kind of helping them, understand these patterns, and even the parental PTSD, and the kid would have PTSD from all the challenges they were having before. And so helping them work through that and have a successful transition home. And so that was very satisfying work for sure. And that again gave me a lot of perspective, which was awesome for me as a therapist, and now more as a coach. But to be able to go into someone's home and see the family in their natural habitat and kind of get a feel for the dynamics of the home and the pets and just the way things were operating. I mean, there's a lot of information that I would get as a therapist walking into that situation that would help me be able to tailor what I was doing to help the families. And so that was a really kind of unique part of that. And that was also kind of a big, it's a big part of the expense of doing a program like that. But so was doing that probably since about 2013 is when I was really doing the in-home interventions and things along those lines. So, but again, I recognize that this is not accessible to a lot of people. You know what I mean? So I've been doing this for a very long time, and I feel like I just have gained so much information on how to help, really teens and families and young adults anyways, but particularly with the neurodivergent kids, where it just needs to be a whole different approach. And so I've created this program, putting all that information together and really tailoring it to kids that are on the autism spectrum or dealing with ADHD or nonverbal learning disorder, and all the things that go along with being neurodivergent, and creating a tailored program designed to specifically help parents and help parents navigate and understand and not make some of the same mistakes that are common that I see with a lot of families. And so Neurodiversity University is really designed to provide a cost-effective and more efficient way to get my knowledge and expertise into video courses, into live group coaching, into parent support communities, into mini courses and YouTube videos and podcasts. And I just feel like it's time for me to try to take all of this knowledge and experience and make it accessible and affordable and efficient so that a lot more people can have access to these years and years and years and years of experience of working with these families. And I say that I feel like I don't want to be like, I'm trying to brag. And I just have done that. There's a good saying in Spanish that like the devil knows more from being old than he knows from being the devil kind of thing. So, like,
yes, I've never heard that before, but it makes sense. It's true.
You learn a lot along the lines. And, again, so I just want people to know that my intention is to take this and, find ways to get the cost down and, take the knowledge and the things that I know are most important and some of the common pitfalls and help you navigate around those and help you learn new strategies and new techniques that actually work so that you don't have to go through the heartbreak of, even get to the point of having an out-of-home placement. I mean, sometimes you have to and you need to, and you get to that point, you need that level of support. But my hope is that we can, work together to prevent those kind of placements and really, big picture, just to have a happy home and family life and help your teen or young adult launch into independence and, get to where they need to be and where they need to go. So helping you to support them to get where they need to go and to launch eventually. But also, really kind of to play the long game that you still have a relationship with your son or daughter after all the dust settles and they're adults and they're more mature and they're, taking care of themselves and on their own, that they want you around or they want you get invited to the wedding, that you get to hang out with the grandkids, all that kind of stuff. That's
you
get
to enjoy your adult children. Yes.
Yeah, you get the benefits of being a parent, instead of, if it's too rough and you get alienated, then you may lose the opportunity to have the actual fruits of parenthood.
Which isn't good for anybody. But one of the words that you said several times that I think is important for people to understand, because it's what I really hang my hat on as a parent, is you use the word tailor. And that's so critical because there's just so much information out there. It's so hard to sort through it all. I know I said this on the previous podcast. I can't read a parenting book. I just can't. I'm a big reader, but I don't know. There's something about doing that. As I'm reading it, I'm thinking of all the things I should have done or I could have done. It just brings up all these really negative feelings. And the idea that the training, really targets parents who have kids that are neurodiverse in these specific ways. And the fact that you can kind of go back and look at it, and something about having somebody explain it to me, it just lasts longer for me. But also, having the parent groups, being able to talk through things, you doing occasional question and answer sessions, all that kind of stuff comes together to make it, again, something you can implement every day. Because, so many parents out there have lived in crisis for so long or have walked on eggshells and just think they're the only parents in the whole world who are going through this. And, you really don't know what's going on behind closed doors. After we had some of our experiences with our kids, every time I went out, someone would come up to me and say, well, I haven't shared this with anybody, but this is what's going on with our family. Or this is, there are a lot of people out there who are just suffering. And it would just be nice to just help them. And in general, it's better for society. Everybody gets a leg up, so that we don't start. And I think a lot of these, unfortunately, I mean, I'm going to age us, Ed, but we're Gen X, and I have no problem saying I have ADHD, but I didn't get diagnosed till my children got diagnosed, because when I was growing up, you weren't asked to do algebra in 7th grade. And you weren't asked to sit still for 8 hours and get 30 minutes of recess. I mean, we were out doing stuff all the time, and you didn't have the distraction of the phone, and the news was on from 6 to 6:15, and that's all you saw. It wasn't like every time there's a school shooting, it's coming across your phone. These kids have it hard. There's a lot to deal with. And then as parents, we haven't been schooled in any of this because most of us didn't grow up with it. So again, the tailoredness of this program.
The way we were parented in this generation is, just good luck, go have fun.
Here, I'm drinking my tab. Here's a cookie. Go out for 4 hours and come back later. Yes, that was pretty much it. And then we somehow
turned into the helicopter parents or whatever, or the snowplow parents. Somehow we overcompensated somehow. But yeah, like you're saying, the information, everything they have to go through. And again, when you're parenting a neurodivergent kid, things can get out there. You know what I mean? So sometimes you're embarrassed to even talk to friends or family about what's going on. You know what I mean? Because it is so
especially
hard
if they're going to be
sometimes behind the
judgmental.
scenes.
I mean, not to, but we all have those members of our family that I'm sure they mean well,
Right.
but in particularly, it always seems like, sorry, it's people who even haven't had kids in a really long time or never had kids at all, who have lots of advice for you. And I honestly think they're coming from a good place and they're trying to be helpful, but they're so off the mark. And
Right.
but as a parent who's already struggling and not sure if they're doing the right thing, when that advice comes at you, you do start to think, well, maybe it's me. Maybe they're
Right.
right. Maybe I should do what they're saying. You know, it's very confusing.
Yeah, and particularly since it's a little outside the norm again, like usually some of the interventions that you need to do or the adjustments you need to do or the accommodations you need to make are way outside the norm of what traditional parenting would recommend. And so, yeah, a lot of times it's like, well, why don't you just hold that boundary? Why don't you just take that phone away? Or why don't you do this or that? Right. And again, it's the, if I did take the phone away, watch what happens. You know what I mean? It'll really blow up here and we're going to
Yes,
have
then
a
it's
major
5 hours of
meltdown.
my
So
day
then, yeah,
instead of just
instead of, yeah,
15 minutes. Right.
right. Yep.
It's always
So,
easier to, yeah.
yeah, so we can, again, like in the program, we're talking about all those kind of things. Like it's not that you don't hold boundaries. There's just ways to do it that are more effective, that are less likely to trigger the meltdowns and the blow-ups and the power struggles. And so there are things that can help. I definitely can tell you that there's things that you can learn that will help you as a parent to be able to navigate that kind of stuff. So, and again, as a parent, sometimes it's like that all or nothing. Either I hold a boundary or I just let them get away with murder kind of thing. You know what I mean? And there's ways to do both, right? So that's part of why I think it is so different. And again, we were talking about this before. Like there's traditional parenting, and then there's parenting a neurodivergent kid, and then within there's your kids in there somewhere. So just because you know what one neurodivergent kid looks like or what works for one of those kids, it may be the exact opposite advice for your particular teen or young adult. So there's always that balance between not only adapting to what a neurodivergent kid needs, but also then your very specific neurodivergent teen or young adult. And there's Maggie making a cameo. So, hi, Maggie. I'll have to introduce Maggie sometime. We'll have to introduce our pet friends at some point in the
Yes.
future. So,
Yes. I have two. You have two.
yep. So, but yeah, so we cover a lot of things. But what again, maybe the takeaway from this is, my intent is to get all this information and experience and knowledge out to people in a way that's affordable and more accessible and provide support for parents that just don't have access to that or don't have connections with, specialists who have been through the experiences I've been through and understand these presentations and the nuances and the ways to navigate around things and all of that really traditional parenting just doesn't address or addresses in a way that's not productive for your neurodivergent teen or young adult. So, but yeah, so we hit again a lot of topics that we need to come back and do later, like the emotional
Yes.
regulation and the accommodations versus enabling. And
That's a
I
tough
always
one.
crack up when I hear the word enable. That word turned into a dirty word somehow, and I think it was more the substance abuse recovery people who did that. Because you want to enable your kid to do things, but healthy things, right? And of course, what we're talking about enabling now means you're helping them do something that's not healthy, right? So we want to enable healthy behaviors and discourage unhealthy ones. But yeah, so accommodating
it's
and
such a
enabling.
balance because once you understand a little bit more about parenting your neurodiverse child, then there's this, well, I want to push, but how hard do I push? I don't want to push so hard that I'm, making it worse. But then have I now, because it's, things are kind of stable and smooth, am I going the wrong direction and not doing enough? And therefore, they'll be in my basement forever. And, that's probably, might be the case for some of us, but, we want them to have as independent and healthy lives as they can.
Yeah.
And
and even if they
I know that
if they do need to live in your basement, like how much independence do you push or encourage or, you know what I mean? Yeah. So,
right.
But yeah, that's the thing. So that idea of knowing when to push, how much to push, and, in what cases to and what cases not to. I mean, it's super complicated, right? And again, there's things that you would do very differently for a neurodivergent kid. And then there's things within neurodivergence that you need to know. So one is kind of learning about the entire neurodivergence idea And then within that, how does that apply to your specific teen or young adult? And so that's a complicated process, but it can be done. I promise. There's things you can do. I'll do my best to make that simple and understandable, and provide you with support along the way as you go through this. And we'll do our best to provide free resources like the podcast and YouTube videos and things like that. And then maybe some low-cost parent support and mini courses and things like that that can go along to help you get the level of support that you need, all the way up to my flagship program of Neurodiversity University, or the Mastermind course, whatever you want to say, where you get twice weekly hour and a half group coaching meetings. You'll get the full curriculum and the parents, the insider parent support group, so like the mastermind support group, if you will. So that'll allow access to me more directly. So hopefully levels of support along the way, and hopefully you'll be able to find the level of support that works best for you and your family. And I'm happy to help out in any way. So please reach out. And probably the best way to do that is go to my website at neurodiversity-u.com. And there's a free training there. And at the end of the training, there's a way to schedule an appointment with me. So if you want to discuss joining any of our programs, please feel free to reach out to me that way. Or you can reach me at the email in the show notes at dr.edcallahan@neurodiversity-u.com. So again, thank you for joining us again. We will keep trying to crank these out, and please let us know if you have specific ideas or things you want us to tackle directly, or send us any questions that you want us to address, and we'll see if we can answer some of those directly, even if we can, or at least batch them into general questions that we're receiving. So thank you for joining us, and we will see you sometime, hopefully in the near future.
See you next time.
Amy, thanks again. Appreciate it.
Sure thing.
All right, take care. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening today. If you haven't yet, I'd like to invite you to watch my free intensive training course, From Chaos to Confidence, a new approach for parenting neurodivergent teens and young adults. It's a solid overview of 3 key aspects of parenting a neurodivergent teen or young adult to help you create a calm environment with less conflict, distress, and resistance, where everyone can thrive. After you've finished watching, there is a link to schedule an intake or screening meeting with me, Dr. Ed Callahan, to determine which level of services would be the best fit for your specific circumstances. And don't forget to join my low-cost parent support community, where you'll find great value through many helpful and practical courses, resources, and find a group of supportive parents who can relate and support you through your questions and challenges. Visit www.neurodiversity-u.com or click the link in the show notes to gain access to my free training and my meeting scheduler, and also where you can sign up for the parent support community. Thanks again for joining me. See you in the next episode.